I present to you the newest in jam arms technology, Ichigo jam arms, apricot arms, almond butter arms, and new fusion arms, cherry almond and raspberry habanero. That one gives the riders a nice good kick in the butt.
Hey all, welcome back to another Toku Ramblings. Today is a pretty big one, I would say. Today is the day we talk about Kamen Rider Gaim. Ugh, I have a feeling I'm not going to come out of this unscathed from people who don't like this. But, where to start? I guess I can start with the opening and before we get to all those things. I really like it. It's a much differenter feeling opening that just hits. It's kind of hard to describe. Yeah, like I like the instrumentals and the way the imagery in the opening main theme works. The song's also really good, and yeah, it's probably one of my top 5. God, this is so weird because this is such a big series to be talking about. So let's just get the basic synopsis out of the way. So, Kamen Rider Gaim takes place in the fictional city of Zawame City, which is apparently Japan's version of Gotham. If you go by a map, a city that has seen a revitalization thanks to the Yggdrasil Corporation. Though now the entire city kind of now being a corporate town, the youth now feel oppressed and restrained and creatively dogged. So the youth begin to make dance who's helped bring joy to the populace from their dull days in rather meh dancing. Look, I'm gonna be real with you here. I'm not particularly fond of the dancing they do. It's not terrible, but it just feels so tacked on, is the way one. Like, it doesn't feel natural. I know it sounds weird, but when I watch these people dance, I don't see dancing. I just see a routine. They went over. Anyway, the groups are broken up into different beat rider gangs and are attempting to compete for dominance over the city. And instead of, dancing to see which team the populace likes, instead they play these Pokemon games called the Invest games with lock seeds. Little padlocks that have fruits and seeds on them that are acquired in the most obvious of places that children go. The shady guy, the bowler hat that sits in the back of the juice bar. But the main story doesn't tactically focus on a beat writer. He's on a beat writer for like 2 episodes and then he's a beat writer again in Toku Rambling, a former member of one of those teams, Team Gaim, who walked away to focus on becoming a member of society. Yes, the society. The one that says you have to get an 8 to 5 job, a wife, 2 kids, a house you're likely never going to pay off, and retire when you are dead. Despite that, he is still close with the team, including their leader, Sumi, second in command, and acting like a girlfriend not over to break up my Takasukasa, Mitsuzune, Michi Kurishima, and backups Chucky, Rita, and Rat. Don't worry about kind of remembering the last 3, they're never that important. Unfortunately, the team's sort of fallen on hard times since they lost our singular stage to rival team but Yua believes he has the thing that can help him in the form of a belt buckle he gets from said shady bowler guy Sid. He contacts Hoto and Mai to meet him, and they find a portal to a mysterious force that features in Bass. The two find the buckle Yua show to them, and Hoto just puts it on his waist, which allows him to transform the local fruit into Loxy. Right. Before I can think too much about it, a monster attacks, Kota transforms and is able to kill him, and Kota just decides that this thing will apparently lead into adulthood, and we go there. And without spoil, God, I'm going to spoil stuff against characters stuff, but Gaim is very much in more line with Ryuki and 2's in terms of You're kind of expected to watch from episode 1 and go from there. It's not like a lot of the previous Heisei Rider series where you could sort of jump around a bit for filler stuff. Every episode in some way or another continues the main core of the plot, which evolves into corporate conspiracy, an alien invasion, betrayal, body horror, and the ascension to fruit Jesus godhood. Because this is the dark season with fruit samurai. Okay, it was supposed to be like bugs, bugs with birds, which you can sort of see in Gaim's main. But again, at its core, Gaim is a coming of age story of Kota's growth from teenager who treats the driver as like basically a toy, just trying to use it in every way imaginable, to a responsible adult who old and hero by extension. And yeah, the story is actually really, really solid. Like, there's a lot of intrigue going on from the beginning regarding, of course, the obviously evil Yggdrasil, the mystery regarding what happened to you, and the forest that is lit. Even it's not a perfect story by a long shot. There are issues, though I more have issues with characters that we will get to. So, like with Ryuki, we are going to start with the other riders besides the main primary four of Gaim, Baron, and Ryugen, and Sengetsu/Sengetsu Sen. So we'll be starting with the first of the main beat riders in Ryu, who is the scissors and the thing that a lot of subversive media does. The moment that the initial veneer is shaken, Spec Ops Alliance white phosphorus moment, which turns the game from a standard modern military shooter to a more psychological thriller, or Madoka Magica's Death of Mo. Me showing that this is not your standard magical girl anime. Ryoji shows that this is going to be a much darker affair in comparison to previous seasons, and more or less revealing the nature of how the invests are created, and his death setting up a much darker phase. Second arc and going forward. In the way it more or less is, this is a phase 1 style season wearing a phase 2 to go off its set. And I'm not saying Gaim's first arc is without its dark moments, like Kota getting real legitimate PTSD from fighting Takatora, whereas in Getsu, or them learning that they are essentially experiments meant by the Yggdrasil Corporation for the drivers. But it's very much in line with a lot of phase 2 stuff until as Kota tries to reason with Ryoji's inner humanity. After he's lost everything when his driver is destroyed in real obvious drug parallels. Unfortunately, he's not much of a character. Again, in the way of Scissors, he's essentially there to serve a purpose, and then that's it. Though I actually would say he's better than Scissors in that he at least keeps kind of coming up, especially like with Asu, his initial butt monkey doesn't treat well, and how it plays out later definitely earns some points for this. But let's talk about his initial butt monkey turned pastry mercenaries butt monkey. He's fine. He's the stereotypical smug, arrogant kind of person who thinks he's so much smarter than everyone in the room, and thinks he can just smooth his way through until life beats him down in the form of aura and essentially treating him like a butt monkey. And and Slave. He is very much just comic relief throughout much of the season. Initially with Ryoji and their attempts to get strong to face off against everyone else, where Ryoji's just kind of tossing around and sort of using him as a shield. And then to Oren, Lackey and his goal to show them kid, here's what real art is. That being said, some of the comedy I do. Like I get the feeling there were probably bigger plans with him, considering that he was sort of one of the first writers revealed in in the first episode he's shown as the leech for Baron, so my guess was he was supposed to be a bigger thing until something happened, and then he just kind of got relegated to comic. But he does get some good growth, especially in the episode of post Kota's initial attempt to contact the overlords, when he realizes everyone else is sort of leaving him behind, and he really hasn't grown much, and he leaves, or because he really hasn't grown much. And it is shown that he does care about the kid in his own weird way, and hoping he doesn't go back to the old beat writer their ways. It's not much, but it is actually a really solid episode. And of course his end of season mode where he uses one of the Kurokage seats to fight one more time as his old friend Suit is touching, but he's sort of more of a background character, which for a third time in a row leads us into the next of the writers. Oren is... I really liked Oren a lot when he was first introduced, and when he was a threat. He gets a little more shaky for me when he's more just part of the comedy duo between him and Hide. After he kind of takes him in. Because when he is introduced, he is legitimately, seriously, a threat. That Suit is threatening. His whole playful demeanor just oozes threatening, and helped by the fact that the actor is clearly enjoying what he is doing. Very much so. And just sort of feels like a perfect comparison to the kids who are primarily being the main users for these jobs. I know they're probably in their mid to late teens, but the series kind of just treats them as kids for some reason. Don't ask me, but I think something that kind of helps put him over is, one, of course, I think a lot of his stuff regarding Hide is actually kind of funny. Though I think the whole Loxy thing being used again is... and some of the humor is kind of hit and miss, especially when we get to the more serious stuff. It kind of drags me out of it, but he does, surprisingly enough, get some... despite becoming sort of a joke after the second arc's midway point, where Kota beats him down a couple of times. When he's trapped in Helheim. When Kota comes rescue him and shows that he is a lot more than the kid he kept giving to, that he's actually kind of... I don't know what he's going on. These kids might know more situation than he is letting on. This is sort of a thing regarding more or less the season about age and stuff, so we'll get more into this with the new generation writers, but Oren is kind of like a precursor to that, and that more or less, despite being older, he kind of comes off just as childish at certain times as the writers, as his reason for joining the whole thing is not for any higher purpose, just because he doesn't like what the kids consider art, and wants to show them what true art is, though it's really just him being, man, though, unlike most of the new generation writers, he at least comes around to realize his fault, and ends up joining the rest of the heroes when things start to go even further south alongside Hide. day. And again, while it's not often consistent, his humor did help to bring bright spots and certainly dark moments for Gaim, which I did enjoy sometimes. And the last of the main extra beat writers is Zach, and really innately Zach wasn't much of a character. Hell, he wasn't even a writer. Like, he was just a member of Team Baron who was just one of the two main faces we knew of. And then Team Baron got super popular, and he became a writer there because of said popularity. I think that's also sort of the reason why, comparatively, he's probably the least developed of the entire main cast. He's basically he sort of plays the straight man second in command to Mai in the terms of the beef riders and trying to get them to stop using the lock seat, since they really don't know what these things are and they've been using them without that knowledge. But after he gets the driver, he's basically the next to go to the sole good rider of the season, where everyone else kind of had shades of anti-hero, anti-villain, or straight villain, depending on the situation. And his last moments are actually really good. With the and to his final fight with, and it is legitimately some really good stuff. He would be a lot higher in terms of extra writers if he did get a bit more development. And now we move on to the new generation writers, and technically the first form of villains that the series has in Yggdrasil / the new generation writers, and initially the Loxy dealer turned new generation enforcer Sid, and boy, talk about it. No, if Ryoji was the scissors, Sid is the guy, as in GAI, not GUY. UI, the second evil writer who's introduced, is rather smarmy, smug, and just oozing for you to just hate on with all of your might. In the world of gray villains, he's just the sink, and in a way he's sort of like Orm when he starts out, and that he sees himself being older technically means he's smarter than the dumb kids he's been handing Loxy. But Orm had his own sense of honor, No, he ignored the plan of using Kota's sister as a hostage to fight him fair. Verily. Like, Sid's just kind of an idiot sometimes. He tries to be the breaker of Kota's spirits in most of his confrontations, from, of course, the obvious, him being the killer of Ryoji, revealing the plans that Yggdrasil has for the city, and just charting into situations where you know for a fact he's just gonna get his ass handed to him, and that's sort of his point to an extent. As Kota and Kaito get stronger, he shows up to just get his butt handed to him and more or less act like a petulant child who claims it's not fair. He's older than them and more or less should be superior to him. Honestly, I prefer his dread Loxy deal portion at the beginning of the story, acting as this sort of shady character in a slightly brighter sort of. I mean, yes, have him more become a writer, but have him more or less play things Like, maybe he tries to ditch town at some point with the law, season more or less offer it to another, but I mean, this is a corporation. It's not like corporations dealing shady dealings. Dealings is a new thing. It would have given the character something more besides just being a hate-sink who does the same thing the guy did, improving the second another point. And that he essentially proves the series' second point, and that the person after him is much, much stronger than him in every way. And then there's Yoko. Yoko. No, what have they done to you? What starts out as such a cool character, strong, Rick, you have to keep in mind, the last season before this, Wizard did technically have the first female tertiary rider that was not. Wizard's Maid was not technically the first female rider to show up in a TV show. So, but she was technically the first one to show up in show, and she kind of more or less just beat up Medusa, and that was kind of it for her. Yoko, she is shown from the beginning to be a prolific fighter, especially the thing where Ryoma is talking to Dakota and Kaito, and just she can fight though decently well compared to Sid, who loses his first fight against the Jimber form, but there's nothing to her character. She just follows orders and that's it. But you'd think more or less getting ditched by her former boss would elicit more things, but she just immediately slivers over to Kaito, who has the new god she's more or less trying to put into this world, and it's so frustrating. How is it so hard to more or less get good female writers? Why is it so hard for them? I should really like her more, but she was just average. Like the Lord, hopefully Ray was changing how we deal with female writers. Thanks for nerd. But now that we've gotten the other writers we kind of start talking about the good member of the initial new gen writer treater, not counting Takatori and Ryo. But I wouldn't really more. His time as a writer is not the most interesting. It's sort of thing that's just there. His time as the mad, insane scientist is the more interesting. Sidori, Aoki's performance as Young is this kind of cold, calculating, and barely showing emotions, and quickly shading to being angry when they're shown that other people can grow beyond on what he has created. Like when Kota shows up with Katsudaki, or Kaito becomes Lord Barry. Ren, he's probably more or less a really, especially as the actor is clearly enjoying the time he has going on here. And again, it's just another character that is enjoyable, especially when he just shows up after disappearing for a little bit in the last arc in a Hawaiian style outfit. Like, this is just a vacation for him, even though underneath there's a guy who was very clearly playing a long game and would have likely won if he was really selected for godhood, which he isn't. And at the end of this long thing, we are now at the main floor, and probably my favorite, ironic, my favorite is the Oja, he feels the best written in this show, and it's kind of like a main hero writer who's more or less had all the optimism just ripped out of him, and that he wants to do the right thing, but that does mean sacrificing some lives when he more or less shows both Michi and Kota the scale of what is at stake here, and why even if his options are not the best, it's the only real plan he has, and why he shows you either gotta step up or you might as well just get out of the game. That being said, it has sort of been the thing that more or less again he is a main writer who had the in that he is kind of naive to the fact that Yggdrasil really does not share his novel goals. Okay, I should probably rephrase that. The main trio he works with don't share his common goals, and he doesn't realize they don't really want to save people, especially Ryama, who just wants to see things just play out. But he's also more or less willing to listen to reason once a possible better solution rears its head. When Kota brings up the Overlords, the two surprisingly hit things off, and there's a bit of a hope spot for the guy who is, unbeknownst to him, completely alone in his desire to save humanity, only to be brutally betrayed by everyone and die. Though that is sort of the in that after it more or less seems like he and Kota are kind of gonna get along a bit. Well, let's come up with a solution. He is rather unceremoniously just pushed aside alongside the initial big bad, as he just kind of sits on the sidelines watching as things play out until the last arc where he has to fight Michi after he's called full loony. Though I feel like he serves that what he is given here really works out, even if he is a bit underutilized in the latter quarter of the season. Seeing Naomi and Kota interact after fact is actually legitimately nice. I wish we kind of got a little more with them. And speaking of his brother, let's talk about Michi. Michi, man, it's a lot harder because the main three have a lot more layers to them than he's actually one of the more mature writers. He's the brains of Team Gaim, and actually is more the secondary writer than Baron is for Kota, and that they kind of work together, and he's that sidekick sort of character. But he also more or less proves like he says that Kota is kind of not even more as they probably shouldn't be doing. He's the one who's working out plans, and like our Kota just things. For most of the initial part of the season, he is the mature one until more or less the series again rips its off and remind you that just because you are quote unquote mature doesn't. It's kind of foreshadowed just as early as like his introductory episode of Getting a Locks. Throughout more or less his and Sid's interaction, he's trying to act intimidating, manipulative, pointing out that more or less he is the brother of his boss. And Sid's entire reaction is just to laugh and just leave stuff to see what the kids ends up doing. It shows early on that that despite his belief, he is probably as immature as everyone else, and it goes with how when he discovers Yuya's death, he tries to hide that, not wanting to break the veneer that they let's have. One group more or less brought up how next is kind of like how there's that one person who tries to keep things normal after like something major happens in the chain. Like, someone's had a major surgery that probably changes their life forever. There is that person who tries to keep something normal, and that is sort of Michi. That's as he goes from being trying to more or less live into being now sort of a liaison for Yggdrasil and trying to get back from Kota and trying to more or less be that best friend, even though he's hypocritically lying to the group at the fate of one of their friends. And that leads to more or less him getting more mentally unstable, as we say. Like, some people more or less joke about that slap, but it's a moment that just proves how while intellectually he's kind of mature, emotionally he's not that. He blames everything on the entire facade of his world breaking down on Kota because he's the one who said all of that. And that's when he goes from just from anti-hero to straight villain. He also starts wearing more sweater vests, and the sweater vest of evil is definitely not gonna catch on. So it is a different kind of because we, the viewers, have an idea on what's going on with Michi. We know he is betraying the group and working with Yggdrasil, but Kota doesn't. And more or less we know that when it's revealed that later he is the one who attacks, and afterwards is trying to kill him, it's all the more tragic for the cast that more or less someone they treat as such a good friend is like that. Though, I am gonna bring this up. Power levels. Like, I would say mostly Gaim is fine about power level. Maybe a bit of Bravo getting taken out by Orange. Gaim's orange arm. Orange is a big thing. The biggest issue I have is the post-Michi versus Takatora fight where Michi, now powered by nihilism, is able to more or less beat both Kawami and Lemon Energy arms because he's now super focused, according to Kaito. He now more or less has something to fight for. I don't know, it's the one thing, but getting back on track with characters. But it does, that's at the end of it all, he loses everything in his path for the utopia. You believe, the utopia for him, Mai, and people he agrees with, which he just refers to everyone. All those betrayals, the lies, the unnecessary says it proves to be nothing because Mike dies because he makes a whole bunch of terrible decisions and trusting people he really shouldn't have trust. And Ryoma more or less points out that he's not the super bag adult manipulator that he thought he was, and is left a sobbing mess with basically nothing until Kota revives Takatora from his coma and gets a rather middling redemption. So this is technically a 46 episode season plus a singular tacked on epilogue, which sort of acts as a a redemption where Takatora decides to scrap all of the lock seeds, keeping in mind that more or less, I guess this universe doesn't more or less have 101 that you don't destroy something like that because in all likelihood other people have taken it. And spoiler alert, in the future, and in both novels and this extra material, more people have lock seeds and drivers. Anywho, a movie villain shows up, and somehow Michi has a singular driver and his original Buddha lock seed. Actually, he transforms and fights, but more or less gets redemption because he chooses not to kill a girl, and Kota just comes and tells him, and dude, it's all fine. It's all perfectly fine. It's not terrible, but it just feels kind of rushed, and that Michi doesn't really do anything that redeems itself. I mean, yeah, he acts like a hero, but that's not much. And now we meet the two warring lords this season, starting with Kaito. Now, Kaito is interesting in a lot of ways. So, the one thing I can give him a lot of credit for is that he kind of breaks the mold of secondary writers that have sort of been in the phase 2 of Heisei, and that they kind of fall into just kind of being sidekicks, especially if their story finishes. Like, Ryo fell into a sidekick after he killed Weber. Date was more or less kind of this mix of mentor and sidekick, and that thus he was there to help, to give advice to Eiji, but he didn't really do much. You say Meteor's writer again more or less had that thing where once his story ended, he kind of wasn't that sidekick. Although his story, ironically, more or less ends at the same time that Forza gets his final power up. So it's sort of a twofer thing where it's kind of ignored. And Beast is the purest definition of a side. Kaito, is probably just as important as in being the main character, and it's best shown in the second episode that shows the two are similar in that they both want though where Kota more or less has sort of a guiding hand to help people in that standard good rider like Yusuke go. Kaito's thing is all about strength, right? Power. Right? When he sees a kid in a tree, he's like, you can jump down, I'll get you. And when he jumps down, he's like, good. Now you are strong. It shows that he's not a person, and in the episode, he is shown to have more. Also, when he finds out his team when he realizes his team had cheated during a match with Team Guy, he's rather upset that they weren't winning on their own power, but because they were using dirty tactics and tricks. Next, and despite more less likely being completely outmatched, does go into fight, showing that he is a good person. But as he does want to help people get strong. And that's the prevailing thing about him, is that he wants power. When he loses to Orin the first time, he goes to the Helheim Forest to get stronger lock suits to fight. Right. When it more or less comes up again, he teams up with Kota because well, Kaito Orin injured one of his friends, and he wasn't too particularly happy. And he does fight with the Wendy. Heck, despite more or less the two's kind of rivalry thing, when Michi more or less decides to backshoot him, then Kaito's like, what the hell, man? That's not cool. Yeah, that's not cool, man. Then it more or less keeps him safe from other things until he gets up and just walks away. Right, but there's also sort of some hypocrisy left. So, despite more or less his hatred of Yggdrasil for what they did to his family, he's more than willing to join up with the same group at a chance for more power. Oh, and that's one of his goals after he leaves Team Baron, not just to more or less give the team a chance of surviving or in smear campaign, but to more or less focus on his goal of taking out Yggdrasil. And again, his social Darwinism works out. And that's sort of the thing I really do. It's one of the. It more or less gets you actually sort of thinking about these characters. Well, not all of them, but when it makes you think, is Kaito really believing in his social Darwinism thing? Does he truly believe the strong will lead the... Does he really believe in a survival of the fittest, natural selection kind of world? Or does he want to do a thing? Does more or less his time with Kota and Mai soften him, and when he learns that both are dead, his willingness to eat Helheim to become strong? Because he knows he's dying, he's infected, and there's no hope now that the Genesis Loxley that he more or less got from fans. I'm not gonna say real because he got that from fans because he was super popular. Popular wasn't working, and that kind of goes to sort of an issue of the end arc of it. Kind of just runs through a couple of villains until it gets the main one. First, it sets up Michi because he gets this new super powerful, dangerous prototype lock. See, but Kota takes care of that, and more or less he's left a wreck by Ryoma when he gets back at the reveals. He kills Mai, so he's out. Then Ryoma seems to be set up as the main villain, and then Baron more or less takes it. Kaito takes the when he eats the fruit and becomes the true final villain, which I will say that more or less it is. I like where his character ends. It feels natural, and yes, it's something that he kind of built up from the beginning with the first shot of Kota and Kaito facing down the Gaim and Baron suits facing down each other, and that the series goes out of its way to prove the two as kind of solar opposites, the Lucifer to Kota's Jesus, if you could say. And I'm probably not going to more or less explain this well because I don't know how to put this well into. Whereas there are probably a million other places that do better character and but he is a great breath of fresh air in terms of secondary writers, and again, that's something I can say about this season. It's a breath of fresh air. But speaking of fresh air, time to talk about Orange Boy himself. There's something benignly fun about him just trying to use the driver he gets for a bunch of banal things like driving around or using it all. Like a kid with a new toy running about, trying to use it in every situation possible. Well, but it does set up Kota's character initially in the first portion. He's naive, and despite trying to more defend the world, he is still very much a youth. He is still a child in some manner, which is best when his sister rightfully calls out on his return to the beat writer's gang is not an actual job and just him playing around with a toy. And the big thing about him is just rough. He is one of the more grown protagonists that this series has done. And that he feels like an entirely different person from beginning of series to end. And his growth over the series thing. Like, Zangetsu is such a big obstacle for him. He is this big, scary thing. He causes him trauma. He more or less breaks him a bit, and more or less that sort of serves as an initial goalpost to beat this thing. This monster that caused him issues. When he gets a hit on him for the first time, it is more or less treated with the growth it is, because no one had gotten a clean hit off of him. And more or less that is proof of a growth as a fighter and as a person, especially as he goes from more or less using it for benign things to using it to change the world how he wants to see it, not through sacrifices, but through trying to more or less find the most peaceful way. Though, let's talk about the one annoying thing about his game. And that being the stuff regarding Michi once he realizes that he's evil and now trying to kill him. Everyone more or less acts like, they have to kill him now. Now, even though they can likely just, cancel his transformation by beating him up enough and taking the lock seat and locking him up and making him realize what he's doing is wrong. It's like, the big thing is more less despite a lot of his growth, he still has a lot of uncertainty issues. And again, the big thing is the Michi stuff. Him just running ahead against the hole and not trying to find. You're dealing. That you'd think more less he would immediately do it, but he just doesn't. Like, the first time is more or less when Michi Zangetsu Shin attacks him and he thinks it's Tor, and he more or less acts tall. What? Like, we're allies now, please don't fight him. It's like, what has this guy been teaching me? If something is wrong, then you need to fight. But, he's honestly a really good protagonist in my opinion. Then probably in the top 5. Again, I haven't watched fully. Well, I can't make a decision yet, but he is really good. The big side character for this season is specifically Mai, and look, again, the Beat Rider stuff is not my favorite stuff. Again, the first arc is not particularly my favorite part, again, because it's so focused on the Beat Rider stuff. And the annoying thing is, once the second arc hits and more or less stuff keeps going there, it's like, what about dancing? We need to more or less be concerned with the Beat Rider stuff. And I'm like, I don't care about this stuff. Legitimately, I do not care about dancing. It's like, let's just get the stupid episode where you guys clear your names over so we can go focus on the more interesting stuff regarding body horror and alien overlord. Well, it doesn't really help that Mai kind of just becomes the damsel in distress during the last arc, and kind of is something the heroes fight over as she becomes the lady of the lady in white. I guess I sort of like the stuff that she gets between like Baron and more or less how it shows his strength. It comes in different forms. In hers, it's emotional strength. Even keeping the Beat Riders together. But again, she's part of a portion of the story I'm not particularly fond of. And the other one is, and really, again, I cannot remember the other Beat Riders to save my life. Like, I mentioned Gaims at the beginning, and more else they've already just. I guess there's Peiko, who sort of acts as sort of a morality chain for Team Bear. Granted that more or less when he's hurt, the team kind of goes from that bully gang to more or less being compatriots. But they don't really do much. They're just kind of there. The other main side characters are DJ Sakura, who's sort of the mentor for Coach. Kota and pushing him to be something, to more or less make something of himself. You know, once that he can change the world and continually gives him the power to do. So even though he is clearly having something going on in the back of his mind, and it is shown that he is a lot more devious because of his relationship with the Overlord. And we'll get to that, but I have mentioned his Kota's sister, who plays the responsible sibling, who's initially dismissive of the whole driver thing until more or less he's using it to actually do something. And then our standard barkeep restaurant owner in Kyojiro, who helps the group out a lot. And the final major character stuff is the Overlords. Okay, look, they're not bad. There's a lot of build-up that I think is good about them. It's intriguing. We're told a lot about them and their society as a whole, but after they revealed, outside of being like neat little distaff counterparts to the main group, the only one who gets anything is Reggie. Rocio is more a weapon than a final enemy, despite more or less being essentially an ultimate. He is interesting in his sort of tragic backstory. Of wanting to do the right thing but dooming his entire plan and losing everything. But he is more just a weapon that does not push in the plot specifically. And then Demishu is your standard hot-blooded, arrogant warrior who just seeks combat in strength and power. Where he shows up a couple times with very low speaking points and is then immediately knocked out by Kota after he arrives on Earth a few episodes afterwards. He's just Reichu's really the only, it could have just been one pushing everything and then the others are back. Yeah. And Reichu is more standard, sadistic, smarmy, smug, villainous. Yes, I know the voice is male, but yes, that is a woman. She is fine. I think her defeat is actually honestly one of the more satisfying moments in Gaim, but honestly, it's just an issue of we don't really get much of seeing the we hear a lot about them, but we don't learn much about them that makes them interesting outside of just neat stuff about Ryoshio and his tragic backstory. And there's probably a reason why Baron was made the final villain over these guys. Oh god. These things going too long anymore. Probably should get a guest hostess. Yes. Finally wrapping this thing down, we have aesthetics and music. I will say that this season looks really, really good. I know for people who don't want, there's the idea of Fruit Samurai might come off as silly or dumb. But I think the designs on here are really solid, matching the specific aesthetic. Called warrior choice. They go like Gaim's samurai, Gaiman's Zangetsu samurai motif, Kaito's knight form, Ryugen's Chinese form, or I'm the Viking of of the issue more comes with the additional forms. It's more the pauldrons that kind of are an issue with them, especially on Ryugen Kiwi. But the pauldrons are less of an issue as we get going, especially for the Genesis Riders and 2's power forms, which are really good. I like the kind of slimmed down design archer feel that the forms later that they kind of had in the Sonic era as a weapon, and both of Kota's forms are great in her. I think Kachidojoki as an extension of Orange Armed is really great, and Kiwami just has this serene sort of finality. The main driver is definitely a bit more on the simple both side, a buckle that has a fruit knife and a place to put the seeds in. And it really does work. It's straight to the point, and you can put... The Genesis drivers do have a bit going on. The more striking red contrast the black of the initial drivers, and the energy portion would... And the energy feeling of it as it's soda instead of just the fruit. It gives it its own distinction from it. The Inves look overall. Also, there's not many designs as they kind of just become more mooky as the season goes on again. In a series that focuses a lot more on Rider v Rider fights, there's going to be a lot less in terms of unique Inves designs, but what we get here are really solid. And a lot of the main musical tracks are really good, really hard-pumping rock that is mixed with traditional Japanese instruments to the tune of what's the samurai aesthetic the series is going for. God, what is it with Toei and doing samurai seasons that pulls out the best in their music or by extension their shows? But yeah, overall, I'm still good after all these years. I have character issues here and there with some things, but as a breath of fresh air after the Deno kind of style the past couple of years, it's definitely one that's worth watching, even possibly going back and rewatching to pick up on things you might have missed the first stuff. It's not without its faults, I will say that. I think, again, the dancing portion isn't good, and some characters don't live up to their full potential. Hey there, Yoko. Well, still not doing anything. Good. But it's definitely one of the better Rider series, and worth a watch. Whether or not it's a good starting point is a hard thing to say, because I wouldn't really say from a modern standpoint it's a lot of what you would expect from Northboard, because the next two seasons after this go back to the previous style. I don't know about X8, haven't gotten into that yet. And it is sometimes, but if you're trying to get into Heisei Phase 1 Rider and struggling, I'd honestly say that this is a good starting point in terms of things forward. Right, for the earlier stuff from just that point of view. So yeah, this is a long one. And we're not even halfway done with this stuff. As always, do the usual things: subscribe, comment, ring the bell, leave comments, and enjoy the rest of the day, or good night.